I discovered my husband's been introducing me as his sister to coworkers. What now? Please. You know, when you find that one person who just clicks with you, it feels like you've won the lottery. For me, that person has been my husband, Josh. We've been side by side for 6 whole years now, and 4 of those have been as a married couple. Looking back, it's been a beautiful journey, one filled with countless memories of love and laughter, and more understanding than I ever thought possible. We made a conscious choice to hold off on having kids for now. It wasn't an easy decision, but we both felt strongly that we wanted to use this time to really focus on each other, to build a relationship so strong that it could weather any storm. And that's exactly what we did. Our days were often filled with simple pleasures. We'd wake up in the morning, and the first thing we'd do was share a sleepy smile and a gentle kiss. Over breakfast, we'd talk about our plans for the day, whether it was me working on a new project at my job or Josh getting ready to crunch numbers at the accounting firm where he'd been for the past 3 years. From what he told me, he was absolutely loving it there. He'd animatedly tell me about the challenging accounts he was handling, the colleagues who had become his friends, and how they'd often unwind after a long week with drinks at the local pub or attend those fancy work socials that always seemed to have an open bar. I was completely okay with his active social life at work. I'm an introvert, and that's not something I'm ashamed to admit. The idea of walking into a room full of finance people, most of whom I imagined would be talking a mile a minute about stocks and audits and all those things that make my eyes glaze over, just didn't appeal to me. And the thought of being on the receiving end of some well-meaning, but probably overbearing mansplaining? Yeah, no thanks. So, I never once felt the need to insert myself into his work world. I had my own group of girlfriends, and we had our own routines. We'd meet up for coffee and gossip, go to the movies when a chick flick we'd been waiting for came out, or have a girls' night in with face masks and a tub of ice cream. It worked for us, and I thought Josh and I were on the same page. But now, after what happened yesterday, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and not in a good way. It suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks that in all these years, Josh had never, not even once, asked if I wanted to meet any of his work friends or tag along to one of his office parties. I mean, it seems so obvious now, but at the time, I just didn't think twice about it. I was too busy enjoying our own little bubble. Anyway, let me take you back a bit to a few months ago. It was a Friday, and I'd had a long, tiring week at work. All I wanted to do was let loose with my girlfriends. We met up at our usual bar, the one with the cozy booze and the best cocktails in town. As soon as we sat down, we ordered our drinks and started chatting away. The stress of the week was melting away with each sip. And then, out of nowhere, this guy walked up to me. He had a friendly grin on his face, but there was something a bit off about it. He seemed kind of familiar, but I knew for a fact that I'd never met him face to face before. He said, "Hey, your name, right?" I must have given him a really confused look because he quickly added, "I'm Jake, I work with Josh." That's when it clicked. I remembered seeing him in some photos on Josh's phone. Now, I'm not a big social media person. I have a private Instagram account that I barely use, just to keep up with a few cousins and old friends. But Josh and I have always had this unshakable trust. So sometimes, when his phone was lying around, I'd absent-mindedly scroll through his photos. I know it might seem a bit nosy, but it was harmless, really. Jake started talking, and I have to be honest, I was feeling a bit socially inept. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to politely end the conversation. He was clearly a few beers deep, his words slurring a bit, and he just wouldn't stop. And then, he dropped a bombshell. He said something like, "It's great that you guys are still so close. I haven't talked to my brother in ages." I was completely dumbfounded. What was he going on about? I just assumed he was drunk and spouting nonsense, so I let it slide. But then he started getting a bit flirty, and that's when I knew I had to do something. I looked over at my friends, and we exchanged a knowing glance. We quickly gathered our things and practically ran out of there. I didn't say a word to them about what had happened. I thought it was just a random, drunken encounter and not worth making a fuss over. I also decided not to tell Josh. I mean, I figured Jake wouldn't even remember talking to me the next day, and I didn't want to make things awkward for Josh at work by bringing up the fact that his colleague had hit on me. I thought it was harmless, really. After that strange encounter with Jake, I tried my best to forget about it. I mean, it was just one of those random things that happen when you're out and about, right? Life went on as usual. Josh and I continued to have our cozy evenings at home, cuddled up on the couch, watching our favorite shows and sharing a bowl of popcorn. Our conversations were still filled with laughter and affection, and I really thought that maybe I had just overreacted. But then, yesterday morning, everything changed. I was out walking our beloved dog, Monty. He's a unique little guy, a mix of several breeds, with the most distinctive markings you've ever seen. His coat is a patchwork of different colors and patterns, and he has these bright, curious eyes that always seem to be looking for an adventure. We were on our way to my regular cafe, The one that makes the most amazing lattes and has the comfiest seats. As I was waiting in line to order, there was an older man in front of me. He got his coffee, turned around, and then his eyes landed on Monty. And what he said next completely threw me for a loop. He exclaimed, "Hello, Monty." Monty, being the friendly puppy he is, immediately started wagging his tail and jumping up a bit, clearly excited to see him. I guessed right then and there that this guy must be another colleague of Josh's, since Josh often brings Monty to the office a couple of times a week. I thought it was kind of sweet, actually, so I smiled at him and said hi. He introduced himself, and just as I suspected, he was from Josh's workplace. But then he dropped a comment that made my blood run cold. He said something like, "Aren't you a good sister?" walking his dog for him. I was so confused that I didn't even know how to react at first. I just stood there, my mouth hanging open a bit, and stuttered, "It's my dog." I regretted it the moment the words left my mouth. I should have just told him straight up that I was Josh's wife, but I was too caught off guard. It was just so awkward, and all I wanted to do was get out of there as quickly as possible. I think it was starting to dawn on me that something really strange was going on. He asked me something about sharing a dog, but luckily, I was next in line to order my coffee, so I was able to use that as an excuse to end the conversation. He left shortly after, and I was left standing there, feeling a mix of shock, confusion, and a growing sense of unease. I seriously didn't know what to do. What the heck was happening? Was it possible that Josh had been telling his coworkers that I was his sister? The thought made my stomach churn. I mean, we have a great relationship. We communicate about almost everything, or so I thought. But why would he do this? Was he embarrassed of me? Did he have some other reason for keeping our relationship a secret at work? I didn't even know how I would broach the subject with him. Part of me was hoping that it was all just a huge misunderstanding, that maybe these guys had just gotten the wrong idea somehow. But another part of me was starting to panic. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also couldn't just ignore what had happened. I only told one friend about it so far. She's my ride or die. And when I told her what had gone down, her immediate reaction was, time to plot his downfall. But I knew she was just being protective. I didn't want to assume the worst right away, or do anything rash that could ruin my marriage. After all, Josh and I had built so much together. Josh came home at around 2:30 a.m. last night. He was drunk, which wasn't unusual after a night out with his work friends. I didn't mind though. I was glad he was having a good time. He just went straight to sleep, which was fine by me. There was no way I was going to have this conversation with him in that state. This morning, I woke up before him, and as I lay in bed, looking at his sleeping face, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets he might be hiding. I decided that I had to talk to him today, and I had to be direct. I didn't want to let him squirm out of it. I started making a mental list of all the questions I wanted to ask him, like why he had never invited me to meet his work friends, and most importantly, why his colleagues seemed to think I was his sister. I spent the morning pacing around the house, my mind racing with all the possible scenarios and explanations. Every time I glanced at the clock, my heart would skip a beat, knowing that Josh would wake up soon and I'd have to face him. I rehearsed my questions over and over in my head, trying to sound calm and collected, even though I was a nervous wreck inside. Finally, I heard him stir in the bedroom. I took a deep breath and walked in, forcing a smile. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He rubbed his eyes and gave me a sleepy grin. "Morning, babe. What's for breakfast?" I sat down on the edge of the bed and decided to just rip the Band-Aid off. "Josh, we need to talk." His smile faded a bit, and he sat up, looking at me with a hint of concern. "Sure, what's up?" I took another deep breath and launched into it. "A couple of months ago, I was at the bar with my friends, and I met one of your coworkers, Jake. He seemed to think we were siblings. And then yesterday, at the cafe, another guy from your work said the same thing when he saw me with Monty. What's going on, Josh? Why do your colleagues think I'm your sister?" He looked genuinely shocked. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared at me, speechless. Then he stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy." I could feel my temper starting to flare. "You don't know? How could you not know? These are your friends, the people you work with every day. Are you telling me you've never mentioned me as your wife?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking flustered. "Of course I have. I talk about you all the time. I don't understand why they'd get that impression." I crossed my arms, not believing him for a second. "Really? Then why have you never invited me to meet any of them? Or go to one of your work events? It's like you're keeping me a secret, and I want to know why." He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. After a long pause, he said, "I guess. I just thought you wouldn't be interested. You know how you are with new people, and I didn't want to force you." "That's not an excuse, Josh," I snapped. "You should have at least asked. And it doesn't explain why your co-workers think I'm your sister." He looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry. I really don't know, but I'll find out. I'll talk to them today and get to the bottom of this. I softened a bit at his defeated look. Okay, but I'm coming with you. I want to hear what they have to say for themselves. He balked at that. You can't come to work with me. It's not appropriate. Why not? I demanded. If you have nothing to hide, then what's the problem? He sighed. Fine, but let me call in first and see if it's okay. While he was on the phone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What if there was more to this than a simple misunderstanding? What if Josh was hiding something bigger? But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to trust him, at least for now. He hung up the phone and nodded. Okay, we can go. But please, let me do the talking at first. I agreed, albeit reluctantly. As we got ready to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect marriage was about to be put to the test. We drove to Josh's office in silence, the tension in the car so thick you could cut it with a knife. I stared out of the window, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. What were we going to find out? Was this all just a big mix-up? Or was there something more sinister at play? Josh kept his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel. When we arrived, I followed him through the sleek, modern lobby and into the elevator. As we ascended, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was so out of my comfort zone, but I was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. We stepped out onto his floor, and I immediately noticed the curious glances from his colleagues. I wondered if they were the ones who had the wrong impression about our relationship. Josh led me to a small conference room and asked me to wait there while he went to find Jake and the other guy. I sat there, fidgeting with my hands, my eyes scanning the room for any clues. There were photos on the wall of company events, and I searched for any sign of Josh with me, but found none. After what felt like an eternity, Josh came back with Jake and another man I recognized from the cafe, whose name turned out to be Tom. They all sat down across from me, looking a bit uncomfortable. Josh cleared his throat. Okay, guys, this is my wife. Your name? And she's been told that you both seem to think she was my sister. What's going on? Jake shifted in his seat and glanced at Tom. I don't really know. I mean, I was drunk that night at the bar, and I might have just said something stupid, but I don't remember thinking you were siblings. Tom nodded. Same here. I saw the dog and just assumed. I don't know why. Maybe because you never really talk about her as your wife. I felt a pang of anger. So it's true. You don't talk about me as your wife. Why, Josh? He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I do talk about you. I guess I never made it clear enough. I wasn't satisfied with that answer. There has to be more to it. What about the photos? Why aren't there any of us together in your office? Before Josh could answer, Jake chimed in. Actually, there were some photos, but a few months ago, Josh took them all down. He said he wanted to declutter his desk. That didn't sound right to me. Declutter? Or were you hiding something? Josh's face turned red. No, it wasn't like that. I don't know. I stood up, my temper boiling over. This is ridiculous. You're clearly hiding something from me, and I'm not going to sit here and let you play games. I want the truth, Josh, and I want it now. Tom and Jake looked at each other, then at Josh, as if they were waiting for him to say something. But Josh just sat there, silent. I stormed out of the conference room, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe that the man I thought I knew so well was keeping secrets from me. As I walked through the office, I heard whispers behind me, and I didn't care. I just needed to get out of there and clear my head. I rushed out of the building, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to put some distance between me and that suffocating office. My tears blurred my vision as I walked down the street, my feet moving on autopilot. After a few blocks, I found myself in a small park. I sank down onto a bench, my body trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. How could Josh do this to me? We were supposed to be a team, sharing everything. But now it felt like there was this huge chasm between us, filled with secrets and lies. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over my friend's number. I needed to talk to someone, to vent, but I hesitated. This was my marriage we were talking about, and I wasn't ready to air all our dirty laundry just yet. Instead, I sat there, staring at the phone, willing Josh to call. But minutes ticked by, and it remained silent. I was starting to think he wasn't even going to bother chasing after me. That thought made my heart ache even more. Was I really that easy to let go? Just as I was about to give up hope, my phone buzzed. It was Josh. I took a deep breath before answering. Hello. My voice came out shaky. Your name? Where are you? Please come back. We need to talk this out. His voice was filled with remorse. I sniffled. Why should I? You've been lying to me, Josh. I don't even know who you are anymore. I know I messed up. Big time. But please, just give me a chance to explain. I'm so sorry. I was torn. Part of me wanted to hang up and never look back, but another part still loved him, still hoped there was a reasonable explanation. After a long pause, I relented. Fine, but you better have a good story. I made my way back to the office building, my steps slow and hesitant. When I walked in, Josh was waiting for me in the lobby. His eyes were red and swollen, like he'd been crying too. He walked up to me and took my hands. "Let's go somewhere private," he said softly. We found a quiet coffee shop around the corner. As we sat down, the barista brought us 2 steaming cups of coffee, but I didn't touch mine. I just stared at Josh, waiting for him to start. He took a deep breath. "I've been a fool. There's no excuse for what I've done. The truth is, a few months ago, I got into some trouble at work. There was a project that went wrong, and I was worried I might lose my job. I thought if I kept our relationship a bit more under wraps, it would look more professional, like I was more focused on my career. I know it was stupid, and I should have talked to you about it." I listened, my anger slowly subsiding as I heard the pain in his voice. "So, you thought hiding me was the solution? That's ridiculous, Josh." He nodded. "I know, and I regret it more than anything. I took down the photos because I didn't want anyone asking questions. I thought it would all blow over, but it just made things worse." I sighed. "What about now? Are you still in trouble at work?" He shook his head. "No, I managed to fix the project, and everything's okay. But I've lost your trust, and that's the worst part." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You're right. It's going to take time to rebuild that trust. But I'm willing to try, if you promise to never keep anything from me again." He squeezed my hand. "I promise. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. You're the most important person in my life." We sat there for a while longer, talking through our feelings and making plans for how we could move forward. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least we were facing our problems together. As we left the coffee shop, I knew our relationship would never be the same, but maybe, just maybe, it could be stronger in the end.